So we talked about HTML and how you can represent data, how you can use grouping elements to group some of the elements together, and what block level elements or inline level elements are. So today we want to discuss further how we can represent some data in a tabular format or in multimedia formats like an image or a chart in a web page. So basically, we will learn how to do these things using HTML today. And so first one up is tables. So a lot of time you will want to present some data in a tabular format. And naturally, tables are a great fit for those kind of use cases. And so in creating something that gives us the ability to experience with all of these things, we're going to create a page like this, which is taken from a website that a colleague of mine has written, and I will link that in the video as well. So basically here what we want to do is we want to create a table like this. This is something like the number of COVID cases for a postal code. So for different age groups, we want to represent these, and the source of this data is Toronto Public Health Open Data. So we want to create a table like this, and so first you want to learn how to represent tables in HTML. So what I have here is an empty HTML document, and I also have added some styles, which I will import from my HTML, and the name of the file is style.css. But you don't need to worry about this for now, because we will learn how to use CSS to style different things in a page later on. But for now, we're just going to change the look of it so that it looks something like this. So I'm going to hide my files here so that we can get started on our HTML example here, and I'm also going to open up this HTML in a web page here. So we'll start from with making an empty HTML document, and we use emmet to create the basic structure. I'm going to again change the number of spaces from 4 to 2 so that it's not indented as much for me. And the title of the page, we're going to call it Week 6 example. And so basically, inside the body, whatever I write here will be shown on the web page. So if I were to refresh this, you can see that it's being shown here. So let's first go through the different elements and different tags that we can use for creating tables. So first we have the table element, which is the root of a table in HTML. So the contents of a table would go inside a table element. And we have captions. We have the optional title or caption of the paper. We have the T-head, or the header of the table, like the top header, top row that says what each column means. That's usually called the header of the table. And we also have the body of the table, T-body, and the footer, T-foot, which appears at the bottom of the table. And except these ones, we will also be using table row, TR, and table data, or TD, to represent the content of the table. So we structure it using these, and then we add the content inside these. And we also have TH, which basically includes the header. So generally, if we were to create a table from scratch, it would be something like this. We would start with a table like this, and then a table has a head and a body. So T head and T body. And inside the head, so anytime that you're not sure about which one to use or how it's going to be used. So for example, if I'm not sure how to use T head, I can just open up this in the MDN website. And you can see that it says, okay, I need to have a T head, and then a TR or table row goes inside it, and then I have the table header elements or TH. So it would be like this. So if I were to try to replicate something like this inside my head, I have a row, so TR, which is a row element, table row. And then inside my row, I have two headers. This age group is one, and the cases is another one. So again, inside my TR, I will have TH, and the first one says age group. And the second one, similar to this one, says cases. So this basically creates the structure of the header of my table, and so I'm going to move on to the table body. So for the table body, we have a number of rows here. So I have TR elements, which represent rows. Inside them, I have TD elements, which represent the data inside those rows. So for example, on the first row, I have unknown and 1 as table data inside the first row. So I have like group, age group, and cases, unknown and 1, and everything seems to be working in order. So one thing I can do is to add borders here, not on the body, on the table. And so if you add borders, you can see that borders will be shown for your table. It makes it easier to see, but this is a bad use case of attributes. And if I hover this, I think VS Code might also have something. Doesn't actually say it, but you can see that this is red. This is because it's deprecated, and you're advised not to use borders ever in actually when you create a website. But since we haven't learned CSS, which basically is responsible for taking care of those borders normally, we would use this one for now to show the structure of our table. So we have a head and a body. Our body has one row, and the unknown and 1 are the data that live inside it. Our head has, again, one row, and these two are table head elements or TH elements. So TH, TR, and TD are the basic structure, and we use T-head and T-body to give it to separate things out, or also we can add T-foot or footer. So for example, if I were to have a bunch of numbers and then have the sum at the end, that sum might be basically presented as a footer, or many other use cases. All right, so seems like we're on the right track. So I'm going to fill out the rest of these fields. So we have 1, 2, let's create another one, another row. This one says under 19 and the number is 11. And then another row that says 20 to 29 and 15 is the number. Now I'm going to copy this 30, 40, 50, and that should do it. Okay, so it says 20 to 29, and then we have 30 to 39. We have 40 to 49, 50 to 59, and that's it. Okay, it's not a complete table, but it seems to do the job. And let's also fix the numbers, 1, 11, 15, and then I have 37, and then 30, and then 27. So if I were to save this, I will have a similar structure for my table. So now this brings us to this part. So basically, this seems to be the footer of a table. So since it appears in the same context and it's the last row, so probably this is meant to be the footer. So I will add it here. After tbody, I will add the tfoot and the tr, or a row, table row. And I'm going to add a td here that says source is Toronto Public Health. And I will also link this, so copy link address, and this Toronto Public Health, I'm going to add an anchor tag that links to it. So let me clear things out. So basically, this is what we have here. It says the source is this giant thing here, and if we format it, it's shown nicely. Okay, so basically we have an anchor tag that links to this page. We have the text Toronto Public Health, and this lives inside the table data. So I'm going to save this to show you what it will look like. So you can see we have some issues here, as this is taking only one column, but in the example here, this spans over 2 columns. So generally this takes up the whole row here, but even though we only provided one TD element here, it only spans one row and it pushes the other column. It only spans one column and it pushes the other column to the right. So if we want to fix that, we need to use col span. So let's go over what col span and row span are. So generally we can use the row span and col span attributes to extend the elements beyond their usual bounds. For example, have an element span 2 columns, or have a heading span 3 rows, or anything like that. So this would be quite similar. I want a table data here that spans 2 columns. So I'm going to add a col span here and say my col span is 2. So you can see that it takes both columns now and everything looks okay. All right, so now that we've learned how tables work, what we can do is we can bring in the actual, let me get rid of this border first. And I'm going to bring in the CSS file that I showed you so that it will look more like what we saw in the other page. So in order to include a CSS, you can use link tag, have our href that points to the CSS file, and say that the relationship here is that this is a style sheet. So if you want, you can also type in link and press enter, and it will fill it out for you. And VS Code will fill it out for you. And you just need to give a reference to the file. So don't worry about this. We will learn more about CSS next week. So we don't need to worry for now about that. And I saved the file, and you can see that my table now looks like this one. So it seems to be working, and everything seems to be on track. So the next thing that we're going to do is add the table caption here that you can see. So we talked about caption in the context of figures, but this is for tables, and we have caption elements here. Basically, you can read more about them in the MDN website. But generally, you include the caption, and then it will be shown as more information about your table. So I'm going to add the caption here, which is shown nicely on top. And I will also add this title up top about this page. So inside the body, I want to have an H1 element that tells me what the content of this website is all about, of this page basically. So I'm going to copy this inside my H1 element, save it, and I can see that it's shown nicely for me. So basically, we now have a table that looks just like the one. So let's recap what we've learned so far. We created tables, we used captions and table head, table body, and table foot. We learned how to use them. We learned about TR, TD, and TH elements that are the building blocks for creating websites, tables inside websites. And basically, you can use these to generate and put tabular data on the websites and make it look very nice. All right, now that we have learned about tables, it's time to learn a bit more about images and how we can use HTML to include multimedia elements like images inside our web content. And the first thing that we want to do is to import an image like this one. I have already included it here, but I wanted to discuss some details here for you before we move to those parts. So generally, you can just go to Google Images and type in something like North York, and you will see that there are a ton of images being shown here, but it doesn't mean that you can actually use them in the websites that you create. And this is especially true for those websites that you will leave publicly available, especially for your final project in this course. And so what you want to do is to make sure that you're using the images with the right copyrights. So if you cannot put this in your website, if you put it there, it's not going to be a good complexion on your website. And so basically what you want to do is you want to only use images that allow you to basically put them on any website or something like that. So in order to do that, there are some licenses that allow you to do things like that. And Google actually gives you a nice tool to do a search that actually keeps those into consideration. So it doesn't show you images that you cannot use. So for example, if I go to the Tools tab in Google Images, you can see that there is this usage rights element here that generally allows me to search for a specific licensing for copyright use of the material. So right now I'm looking for Creative Commons license, and mostly Creative Commons licenses are very permissive. They allow to use the items that are published under this copyright. But they have some variations regarding what you need to do or how you will need to attribute the person that created that image or took that image when you use those images. So if I were to, for example, open up this image, this example that we have here, so this one, if I were to open this up, it brings up wikimedia.org, which is a nice website because it gives you information about copyright and what you're actually allowed to use. And so the licensing here is CC by SA or Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike. So this licensing allows you to share. So this basically means that you can put this image in your website and you can also remix it. You can change it, open it up with Photoshop and make modifications, add filters, whatever you want. But these things can happen under these conditions. The first one is an attribution. So if you use this image, you must give appropriate credit, provide a link to the license, and indicate if changes are made. Basically, you need to indicate it in your website. You may also do so in any reasonable manner, but not in any way that suggests the licensor endorses you or your use. And you also need to follow the share alike pattern. So this means if you change it, you need to still publish it under same or compatible licenses. So it needs to allow the same thing to anyone that wants to use the image that you create off of this. So basically, the steps afterwards are normal. You download this image and you go to the Squoosh website that I showed you. So for example, if I were to use this image, I will select it and open it up. So this is my image. And for example, I would drop it here. Of course, this image is already has been optimized and resized so that it cannot do much better than this, which is you can see it can compress it up to 27%, but not much more. But generally, you drop it here, you will edit it, you will resize it if you need to. So for example, if this image is very large, I might want to consider resizing it if I'm going to show it like in a small portion of my website. So I won't notice the difference, but I will be downloading the file. So users will be downloading the file, so we want them to have to download as little as you can. So generally, this also allows you to take a look at the original image versus the compressed image. So basically, so that you can compare how the quality is going to be different. So let me make this very evident. So for example, if you look at here, you can see the quality is now very different. It's a little bit blurry here, but when I move the cursor over there, you can see that it's clear. So you would want to do something that looks makes this image look nice on your website, and then you will download it. And something else that I forgot to show you is that when you're compressing this, you can download in different versions. So you can convert it to a WebP image, for example, or a JPEG image, or a VIF image. So these are new formats that you might try to use, and you can see they have a much smaller image size. So JPEG is 95 kilobytes, while WebP is about 70, and AVIF is 52 kilobytes. So, but whenever you want to use a new format, for example, WebP is created by Google and maintained by Google, and it's a new format that allows much smaller file sizes. So if I wanted to make sure that my users can open up this website, first of all, I can use the Can I Use website to make sure that these are supported. So as of now, WebP is supported for 92% of users, but generally Safari is not giving it a very good support, and IE doesn't support it. So and older versions of Opera did not support it. So right now, 92% is not high enough. So if I were to use like WebP or AVIF, let me also show you AVIF. So if I were to use any of those, so for example, this one says 24% is the support for it. And generally only Firefox latest versions and Chrome support it, and Opera. So I want to use these formats, but since many users will not be able to open them in their browsers, I will also want to have a fallback to this JPEG image. And we will learn how to do that here. All right, so now we have our images in this folder. And we want to add them to our website and do something like this here. So I want to add the image, and I also want to give credit to the person who took this image and uploaded it for my use. So first of all, let's first include the image. So I'm going to hide these files again and go to here and start adding the image tag. So we learned about image tag, and it's generally the same thing. We want to add the source, so src equals, and then the path, the image that you want to be loaded here. And right now I'm using a relative path, but you could also use an absolute path. And basically, we also want to have an alternate text, and we talked about alternate text or alt. This is shown if this image is broken or the link is not correct. So this will be shown to give a hint to the user what was supposed to be appearing here. And let's say this is downtown North York. And so if I save this file, you can see that it's showing up here. Now, I want to make one change, and that is I want to make this be a little bit smaller because it's taking too much space as of now. So I can add the width of, for example, 500 pixels, and it needs to be in a double quotation. Looks much better. This would be what we would see without zoom. But maybe 600 pixels is better. And let's get back here. Okay, so this is my image. It's being shown here. But we actually learned that if we want to have captions like this, it would be a very good practice to use the figure element and add fig captions there. So I can wrap this in a figure element. And let me format the file and then also include a fig caption, and give proper attribution to the person who has uploaded this image. So if I were to do so, I will have to come here and look for the attribution links. So it seems like this website does not have the attribution text, but I showed you that other websites like Unsplash do have those. So if I were to, for example, use this one, I will also have the option to add the attribution text. So let's say I want this one. It would say you will need to add something like this that says photo white, and this will be an HTML so that you can just paste it in. But this is not the case for Wikimedia. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type this out. So here I would say photo by colon. Let me just copy the text here. And let's copy the link to this one. href equals, and that's the first one. And I need also link to CC by SA, which points here. And let's close the anchor tag after 3.0. And let's try to wrap this thing and save to see what we have here. So we have exactly the same thing, photo by, and then this person with the proper attribution. All right, so now that we have attribution text here, we are correctly using the image. And so the next thing I want to show you was how to actually try to have different formats of the image work on different browsers. So as you saw, not every browser supports AVIF or WebP. So I'm going to try to add an element that allows multiple formats to be added to have a fallback. And so if we take a look at the MDN picture element, let's see, the picture element contains 0 or more source elements and 1 image element to offer alternative versions of an image for different display scenarios. So as you can see, it allows us to add multiple versions of an image, and it will use the one that is more proper in our use case. So in here, I want to add multiple formats. So I can use a picture element. So I would add a picture element. I will add the image. I will move it up to within this picture element. And then now I can add multiple sources like this one. So I can say source src set equals, and then add another format, which could be images, and it doesn't autocomplete it for me, so I will have to copy the file name. So this is the WebP version, images, and then WebP version. Can also do the same for AVIF version, and this would be the top priority. Okay, so I saved the file, and I shouldn't see any difference because just giving multiple formats of the same file. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the network tab, and this will basically show me what is being sent over the wire when I'm loading this page. So let's go ahead and see which one is being loaded here. We can see the HTML is being loaded, jQuery and other stuff are being loaded as well. So I can see that my computer is using the AVIF version here, northroot.avif. And this is mainly because my browser is Chrome, which supports AVIF. So if I were to open this up in another browser that does not support it, it will use WebP, or if it doesn't support that, it will use JPEG. So generally, you can allow multiple sources to be added for the symbol for the same image. So this is how you can add images to an HTML document. All right, so now that we've learned how to add some multimedia information to our website, you can go ahead and try audio and video yourself. So they're very similar to this picture element that we talked about, and you can add them at different sources and have the browser play them. And you can also take a look at like the video element, use various attributes by checking out the MDN website for it. Next thing that we wanted to discuss in the class is how to use JavaScript, which is what we learned in the first roughly 5 weeks of the class. We want to know how we can use JavaScript and include it inside of HTML and use JavaScript in websites to create dynamic elements. So basically what we want to do is now adding a script tag or a script element to our HTML, which allows us to run JavaScript functions and run JavaScript code. So to do so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, just before my body ends, I'm going to add a script tag. And the script tag, there are two ways of writing JavaScript in HTML. The first one is like this, where you write the JavaScript inside of HTML directly. So in cases like these, we can run any kind of program, any kind of JavaScript code that we want here. So for example, if we were to do a console.log here and say hello world, I could do so, and I can see the contents of this is demo2. So I can see what is being printed to my console right here inside of this developer tools in Chrome or any other browser that you're using. So you can see that this is hello world has been printed, and this is my console. And it also shows me that this was executed in line 70 of index.html. So this is the location of the file. And I can run loops here, I can write functions, and generally any kind of generic JavaScript code that you learned about can be used here. So this was the first use case of the source tag. The second one would be to include JavaScript code that lives outside of our HTML files. So what I can actually do is I can add a script tag and point it to a file, for example, main.js, or it's more commonly called script.js, and have it run the contents of this JavaScript file in the context of this page. So I'm going to go ahead and create this file now. So let me close my images folder and add a script.js file here, which will be included. So let's try out to see if this code is being executed. I can add a console log hello from script.js. And you can see that my code is being executed line by line. So it first runs a script.js. All of the contents of here is executed. And then it runs this console log, which prints hello world to my console. So this is how we can write JavaScript inside of our HTML or in a separate file and include it in our HTML file. And this gives us the ability to use objects that are defined globally here in other contexts. So for example, I can have a function here that says say hi, gets a name, and logs hi, and then the contents of the name variable. So if we were to run this function, it would be something like this, say hi, and then pass Nima, and it would say hi Nima, or have something like this, hi Nima, how are you? But something else that we can do is we can actually call this function in the other context, because This function is being defined globally. So since it is defined globally, I can run it anywhere. So something else I can do is I can actually use this function inside of when opening my developer tools inside this page. So I can say, for example, John, and it will print, "Hi John, how are you?" So the function is working in any context that it can be executed. Another context would be here. So I can say hi and pass Jane here and save it. So it says, "Hi Nemo, how are you?" because of this line here. And it says also, "Hi Jane, how are you?" because of this line. So, and notice that these are being executed by the order in which they are included in this file. So first this file, this script is executed, and then the other script. So you can generally define a lot of JavaScript code here, and you can use it here. But most of the time, you will also be using code that other people have written and use those large modules that are available online. So, for example, I've shown you some of the examples in NPM, and there are a ton of libraries included in NPM, but you can also include the code that other people have written, and that's the next thing that we're going to do here. So what the next step that we're going to take here is to create something like this. And you can see that this is a very nice chart being shown here. And it tells us all different things about the number of COVID cases in this part of the city. And so what I want to do is I want to use third-party libraries to create a chart like this. And the library that we're going to use here is called chart.js. So chart.js is a simple yet flexible JavaScript charting, and you can do a lot of things. You can create very nice graphics and visuals with this library. And it can also create lots of different types of charts. And the one that we're going to use here today is a bar chart, which is what is shown here. So I'm going to use the documentation, go to get started to see how I can go about installation of this library. So there are a number of ways. NPM is not something that we can use in a project like this because we don't have packagers in our project. So you will see examples of projects that can use NPM in front end, but generally for now, NPM is only used in Node in our class. So we're going to be using one of these CDNs to include chart.js, and I'm going to use the CDN.js version. I think, let's see, yes. Okay, so when I click on this, it brings me to CDN.js. So CDN.js is a very large website which hosts all kinds of libraries. And you can find those libraries by searching here, or many of them have the link to CDN.js in your documentations, like the one that we saw here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to include the chart.js library from here. So I'm going to copy the script tag that includes this library. So notice here that the source points to a URL. So this is the URL to an object, to a file. And this can be an absolute or a relative URL again, just like other things that we've seen before. And so here we have it pointed at chart.js. So it loads it and it adds all of the functionality within chart.js to our page so that we can use those functions. So I'm going to save my file and go back to the documentation to the getting started part. So generally, we know that you can go ahead and read the documentation here, but we can go ahead and see an example of a bar plot here, bar. And to get started first, I need to create a new chart using a context. And so we need to learn how to use context first. So the context would be something like this. We need to add an element and then get that element and basically fetch it using JavaScript like this. So I'm going to follow the documentation here. So I'm going to add the canvas element. So this is an HTML5 element that can do drawing and rendering for you. And we want this to appear after our table. So I will paste it in here. And I will copy this line to get the context object that points to this element so that we can draw something in it. So I'm going to add the functionality here to draw the chart. So I have my context object now. Then what I can do is I can follow something like this here. So I'm going to say var my bar chart equals new chart. We give the context object that we have from here. And then we need to pass in some options that can let the library know what kind of a bar chart we want to be shown here. So I want the type of my chart to be a bar chart. And I want to include some data and some options. Okay. So we need to go ahead and see how we can pass in the data and the options here. But I'm going to skip ahead and do some of the things from, well, actually, let's move on to this part. So this is how we would have to pass in the data. So I have my data that needs to be passed. So data colon, and I will need to pass something here. And then I will also need to pass options. All right, so let's move on to see what kind of data and options objects we need to pass. And notice that here we have our labels here, which are probably strings, because as you can see, it says unknown or less than 19. So I want to be able to add my own labels to the X axis and have the numbers appear on the Y axis. So the way that we want to go about this is to provide the data sets in our data. But before doing that, let's look at this example. You can see that we can provide labels for the ones that will appear on the x-axis, and then provide the data for the data that is being actually shown. So we want to have something like this. So inside the data object, we want to have these labels as an array where each element will be one of these labels. So it would be something similar to unknown under 19. So unknown less than 19, 20 to 29, 30 to 39, 40 to 49, so on and so forth. So let's do this until we have all of the elements in our row. And the last one is 90 plus. So these are our labels. And then let's move on. We want the datasets array like this. And we want it to include data. So the next key in my dictionary would be datasets, or the next attribute in my object, which is an array that only has one object for now. And then we will be adding the data here. So data would be 1, 11, 15, 37, 27, 15, 7, 13, 10. So I have these numbers here. Let's format the code again. So let's see what we have so far. Okay, so we seem to have an error. It says script.js line 11. We have illegal constructor. This is because this is a new chart, but it seems like my autocomplete in VS Code has done something to it. Just to be sure, we come back to the bar and look at here, and we know that this is a new chart. So let's try this now. Okay, so everything seems to be in order. We're creating a sample chart that includes our data here. And it's very similar to this one, except that the background is not right. So we can try and add the background here. So inside of this one, inside the data sets, we can say, I want the background color for this data shown here to be something like light blue. And you can see that it's being shown like this. And we are missing a point in 90 plus. 10, 13, 7, 15, 27. Okay, I missed the 30 here, which shifted everything else. Okay, now it's working. Something else that we want to fix is that we want it to write case by age group instead of undefined here. So we will give the data here a label so that it says case. Let's double check. Case by age group. And save the file, and that's the correct result. Okay, so everything seems to be working. So let's recap what we've done here. So we learned how to include JavaScript inside of HTML, how to run JavaScript code in the context of our web page. We use the third-party library by including it using its CDN, or Content Distribution Network. And if you open up this, you can see that this is just a JavaScript file. So generally what it does for me is it creates all of these functions here. And this helps me by allowing me to use the functionality that has been created by the code here to create charts like this one, like the one that we created here. which is a bar chart that uses chart.js library. And we created a very nice looking website here, and we learned how to add multimedia content, tables, and images in HTML.